1977, George Lucas formed a legacy.
Force is with me, and I am with the Force.
Inspired by mythology, his saga has become a passion for many.
Feel the Force around you.
His legend has become our story.
It's true. All of it.
One of resistance,
We are the spark that'll light the fire that'll burn the First Order down.
rebellion,
Rebellion is built on hope.
and redemption.
I am a Jedi, like my father before me.
This is Star Wars Reactions.
Remember, the Force will be with you, always.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to Star Wars Reactions. We are so glad to be back behind the mic after an unanticipated break because of a certain storm that came through, but we're excited to be back and excited to be talking some wars. So let's get some introductions out of the way. My name is Aaron Harris, and not joining me tonight is my co-host, the David Motters. He is out with family and tonight, and, enjoying some family time and friend time, which is well deserved, especially after everything that's been going on lately around the world. So enjoy that time, David. We miss you, but never fear, you don't have to sit here and listen to my dulcet tones all show long, because joining me is a good friend of the show, awesome guy. You've heard him on the show several times, and you will continue to hear him on the show as long as he is willing to come back. He is the host of the Rebel Base Card Podcast, all around awesome guy, and the guy with the most card knowledge that I know, Greg McLaughlin. Greg, welcome back, my friend.
Oh, thank you for that nice welcome. And I would say, if I'm going to be filling in for David, I know he would say something about the fact that his Tigers, went through and they are moved to the second round of the divisional play in the Major League Baseball playoffs. They went through a Houston team like butter. There we go. So as we are finishing up the wild card races, whenever this comes out, I would say congratulations to David and Tom Gross, who are big fans of the Detroit Tigers. But I can't root for them too much in the Cleveland series. I'm from Ohio originally, so I got to root for the Indians a little bit on that one. So
It's okay. I'm still bitter that my Braves got eliminated by the Padres.
yeah, it's amazing, as we're recording, we still have the Brewers Mets, and it'll be over by the time that's going on. But yeah, a lot of series went pretty fast.
Yeah.
San Diego and and all that, and Kansas City took out Baltimore. So I have to give it. I'm sure that Ross Hollabin somewhere is having a couple of moments, and of course our Rays didn't even get there. So no, so it's some bittersweet, but that, my friend, is baseball in a nutshell. It'll always kind of break your heart in some occasions.
Oh, it will. I can't believe we're already in the postseason too.
Exactly. So you won't have to hear me giving you updates of the Brewers Mets series because when we record this, when we release this, but however, it's not far from my field of vision, so I'll just keep going on.
That's okay. On the TV behind me is the Bucks and the Falcons. So
there you go.
So if you see me just kind of twist my head around, it's probably because I'm trying to check a score. But hey,
it's a great time of the year, isn't it?
It is. Hockey is starting up. We got football going on and baseball winding down. I tell you, It's a sports lover's heaven.
Basketball is just starting to get into mini camps, and so you'll get your Orlando Magic, and we get our Chicago Bulls and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it'll be starting soon. So yeah, October, great month for sports.
Oh, absolutely. It certainly is. And you know what else is great about October?
Oh, you're going to tell me.
I am going to tell you. Well, first off, let's start off by saying we're recording this October 3rd, 2024. And today, 10 years ago today, we saw the television premiere of Disney's first venture into the world of Star Wars.
That's right.
After their purchase. They, of course, purchased Lucasfilm in October 30th of 2012. So we're approaching the 12th anniversary of that. But 10 years ago today, October 3rd, 2014, saw the television premiere of Star Wars Rebels.
Hmm.
And if y'all know anything about me, that's my jam.
And I wouldn't have picked that up at all over the years of knowing you. Not at all. Not at all.
If the chopper in the corner doesn't give it away, I don't know what does,
Well, and that's what I was saying. Like, when we got through the initial part of the storm, not to make light of it, that was one of the first things I kind of asked you was like, I need a chopper update.
Yeah.
And we got that in the clear. Like I said, amazing that you guys got off as light as you did.
Yes.
Sorry for the folks in the mid-Atlantic. They really got pounded. But I would say that, yeah, 10 years ago. And it's funny because not only was it on Disney, but they put it on Disney XD.
Yeah, exactly. It was on Disney. And that's what was crazy, because if you actually look at the way they released it, October 3rd, 2024 or 2014, that was the release, the premiere on Disney XD. They actually released Spark of the Rebellion, the premiere, a couple weeks before the week before on September 26th, exclusively on the Disney app that they had at the time. As I Watch Disney or something, or Watch Disney XD, Watch Disney, whatever that app is, which I still have because there's a really cool Rebels game on it. It's the only reason I have not removed that app from my phone is because it's got a Rebels and a Resistance game on it. So I can't. Wow. It's the only reason I still have that. It's quite fun. But yeah, so sometimes, depending on where you live, if you go to IMDb is going to tell you September 26th, but that was only if you had a cable subscription, and not all cable companies gave you access to the apps, unfortunately. I learned that one the hard way, because my first viewing of Star Wars Rebels was October 3rd when it premiered on Disney XD.
Wow. And for me, I don't think that we had Disney XD. And so and as we'll get into it, when I started getting into it a little bit into season 1, I didn't have Disney XD. I bought the episodes off of iTunes.
Oh,
so I was just looking through my iTunes library, and I have just about all of it, I think, on iTunes. So if well, not so much for season 3 and season 4. I think we had maybe gotten the channel at that point. But a lot of those early episodes, were bought, paid for, and enjoyed.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no. I know, even though I was watching them live on TV, I did the same thing. I bought them off through iTunes as well, so I could watch them wherever I went.
Yeah.
Because I was hooked from the opening scene. And if you can't tell, folks, we're talking Star Wars Rebels tonight. For the 10th anniversary, we are having a Rebels, basically a Rebels Remembered party here, Star Wars Reactions. Because honestly, if it was not for Star Wars Rebels, I don't even know if this show would be here.
I don't think so, because at some point you did. You started, or you got on Rebels Reactions on the Coffee with Kenobi network. But let me ask you this: Did you start? Like, where did you start when that show, or was that show already in progress when you kind of took over the hosting?
Dan and Corey Dan Z and Corey Club. They were hosting Coffee with Kenobi, and they were doing Rebels Reactions, and they basically they passed it off to me in the middle of the second season.
Okay.
So is when I took over. I want to say, what was my first episode? Hold on, I could tell you. If you give me a second, I can tell you exactly what my first episode was, because but I took it over from them and had a blast doing it, because when Star Wars Rebels first released, and the opening sequence with the TIE fighter, and this was before they added the opening scene with Vader and the Inquisitor. The initial opening scene was the TIE fighters flying over Lothal. And to hear the TIE fighters hum, it just blew me away. I was sold at that point. I'm like, oh, I'm done. I'm sold. Bring me on. And so I was a huge fan from the get-go. And when Dan and Corey decided to take a break, they asked me to fill in for them. I volunteered, honestly, is what I did. And then it ended up taking over that year, and ran the last couple seasons there, and had the absolute time of my life doing that.
Well, it's kind of funny because this was before, obviously The Force Awakens comes out, at the end of 2015.
Mm-hmm.
And so, my watching Rebels, I want to say predates my starting to get back into card collecting. So
Okay.
I think it was a combination of, I did see some of the Rebels season 1 cards eventually at, places like Toys R Us and all that.
Mm-hmm.
But I wasn't getting back into collecting at this point. But it is kind of funny that I think Rebels really is a key for me kind of getting back into Star Wars. And this is, about the time maybe, as The Force Awakens or more stuff that's talking about The Force Awakens is going, probably about the time I may have discovered Coffee with Kenobi, when I went looking for podcasts, because thinking like I'd been listening to podcasts, since the early 2000s, but I hadn't really thought about like, oh, I guess there are probably Star Wars podcasts out there.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that was, things like Coffee with Kenobi and the Cantina Cast, and Full of Sith, I think were some of the first ones I listened to. Yeah. And of course, that's how I discovered Rebels Reactions.
That was so much fun. Because that really got me into I met a lot of people through doing that.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people I still call friends and have been on Rebels on Resistance Reactions, and it
Carabast.
Carabast.
See, I know what you're
appropriate. It's appropriate. We have a Carabast moment here. But yeah, it got me going into this world of podcasting because of this show. And my first episode was actually I believe this was it. Actually, no, that was not it. It was Blood Sisters.
Oh, okay.
Blood Sisters.
Look at season 2.
That was the one with we find out a little bit more about Sabine's past when her and Ezra go on that mission, and they end up being her and Chopper go on the mission and ends up being a gonk droid they're looking for, and her old partner in crime shows up working for Black Sun and ends up joining them on missions going forward. So
help me restore some memory here. Didn't Disney release a bunch of small vignettes that talked about each character before Spark of the Rebellion?
Yes, there are, and they're actually on Disney Plus under the shorts and stuff.
That's right.
But they have them there. There was a short about Sabine, about Chopper, about Hera, about all of them. And of course, honestly, the Sabine one was the best for me, because she's basically just going through spray painting TIE fighters while being chased by stormtroopers, and it is just. And then of course they all blow up. And she's just walking away, and which is why later in season 1, when they steal the Gazati transport to go rescue Kanan from Mustafar, that what makes that scene so cool is it ties directly into that short. So if you hadn't seen the short, you don't get the connection or a couple of the jokes, because they're like, the artist is back. And they're like, oh no, not again, as everything starts blowing up. And Sabine even makes a few comments about them getting slower than they were before and stuff like that. And that ties directly from that short that they did. But yeah, there were like, I want to say 5 shorts they released at that point to introduce the series. And what's cool about those shorts is I got to see those shorts at Star Wars weekends.
Oh, they were still doing them.
Well, they were at Star Wars weekends before Rebels was released.
Right.
Because Star Wars weekends was end of May, beginning of June. And this premiered obviously in October. But they had the cast of Rebels there. They had Vanessa Marshall one week, Tia Sircar another week, Steve Bloom, and Taylor Gray were all there, one each of the 4 weeks. And I met them before the show even premiered. And they were incredible. That was an incredible time. And just helped enhance my enjoyment of the show too, because they were, one of the things people worried about when Rebels was announced and when it was coming out was, how is it going? We got these awesome voice actors in it, but the only voice acting people they'd been experienced with are the cast of Clone Wars, who were very pro fans. They were literally constantly interacting with fans. They were constantly doing so. How is this new crew going to come in? How is it going to measure up? And they picked up right where Rebels team, right where Clone Wars left off. Vanessa Marshall, I mean, she was right out there up front, leading the way, pushing fans. The whole they had a whole thing going with fangirl flair. They would throw their hands up in the air and do it. It was great. And they still do sometimes, but Rebels really was a stepping stone for Disney, because I mean, this was the first thing they released Star Wars wise after their purchase, because you mentioned earlier Force Awakens was being made, but it came out almost a year later after Rebels premiered. So this was their test into new waters for Disney at that point.
I'm kind of curious your first reactions to the characters when you saw them on screen, and who sort of maybe piqued your interest, or maybe you sort of clicked with. I know for me, it took a while with Ezra. Maybe it's just because I was like, I think Kanan maybe spoke to me, as maybe I'm a little older, as that sort of like, oh, here's a Jedi that, he has a sidearm, plus he has this pretty cool lightsaber. And of course, I like him and Hera's, I like the chemistry between those two characters. I loved, Chopper. Zeb was interesting, and even Sabine. But yeah, it took me a little while to warm up to Ezra. I am kind of curious. What was your reactions to the characters, and who, maybe Chopper was your first, but who was your first?
Oh, honestly, it goes to Kanan. Kanan was my first, and I love Chopper. Chopper is my absolute favorite now, but I had to grow into Chopper and see more of Chopper before I literally went head over heels. But what really won me over with Kanan was that scene in the premiere episode in Spark of Rebellion, when they're pinned down by Imperials, and he looks at Ezra. He's like, kid, I'm about to let everybody in on the secret. And then he climbs over the crates and just calmly walks out, twists and turns a little bit to avoid some blast, assembles his lightsaber, and strikes his pose. It shut everybody down at that point. That right there to me was, and to me is still one of the coolest images to come out of Star Wars. Not just Rebels, but Star Wars, because that confidence and aura that he had about him and at that moment.
Well, not just that, but the fact that, of course, the style of Rebels was, not as detailed as Clone Wars, and some of it we know to kind of like it saved a little money, but they're distinctive. The Rebels' distinctive, lightsabers, they were really thin, and the the Vader. Some of it has they take a lot of cues from Macquarie, of course, Zeb being an early concept for Chewbacca. A lot of Chopper's the limbs and the antenna are straight out of Macquarie's concept for him and C-3PO, and so even though it looked a little different, and of course it wasn't as detailed, but you loved what they were going for and what they were able to put in there because they were making so many odes to Ralph McQuarrie.
Oh yeah, no, that was what was so wonderful about the show is the nods to Ralph McQuarrie, not just with Chopper and Zeb, but with a lot of things. They took even, and it wasn't just something they did at the beginning; it was something they did throughout the series as well. There is an episode later in the series where Imperial send out a droid to try to hunt them down. Thrawn does it. In season 3, I believe it is, and it ends up being a disguised droid. It looks like a protocol droid, but it's actually a assassin droid type thing, and it's basically a early design of a protocol droid from Macquarie. So it's little things like that really separated Rebels from Clone Wars, and really caused it to take off on its own. I know one thing I don't criticize Rebels a lot, mainly because there's not a lot to criticize, because to me it's so fantastic. But the one criticism I've always had about the show was season 1, because to me they were trying a little too hard to make the connection between Rebels and the original trilogy, bringing it in, and they brought in R2-D2, they brought in C-3PO, which was cool. They brought in Lando, they brought in
Princess Leia.
They brought in oh my gosh, Bail Organa. I mean, they were bringing in all these characters from the original trilogy and from the prequels to make that, almost trying to like bridge a gap. See, it's the same world. It almost to a too much of an extent in my book. But doesn't mean the episodes weren't great. They were fantastic. It just, to me, just felt they were that's my only criticism of the show, is they tried a little too hard to draw the connections.
Well, it did kind of give you that feel of there was sort of like the adventure of the week. And that is something that, as we have found in the live action shows, that the animated series seems to get traction a little better. And it's sort of like make us get used to these half-hour, these 23-minute episodes, and they have to hit certain beats. And I think some of the early stuff you start to go, and like I said, liking just about everything but Ezra. Early on, you start to go, like sometimes my patience may not have been there for his hijinks. And although I did like him and Zeb early on, they really were fighting like cats and dogs, and Chopper. And so I like kind of the establishing that. And I think a lot of that pays off later. But yeah, I think you're right. I think there was a lot of I think by the time they got into season 2, and I would say you'd probably say that, season 2 and 3, you really start to get into that groove, and you see where the story's going, and you see these introduction of these elements, the Inquisitors and the Grand Inquisitors we'll get into here in a little bit. And then, by the 4th, when it starts to, we know that's going to be winding down. Yeah, it does sort of like if you're starting your rewatch, it is kind of hard to get through a lot of that season 1, because you're going to go, okay, come on. I know it's good. I know it's going to get good. No, it's going to get good, But yeah, you have to go, oh, that's right. He had the little, he didn't have the lightsaber, the combo lightsaber right away. He had that, the little slingshot thing, and you're okay. Yep. And this is before the Darksaber and all this kind of stuff. But, as we know, and as you've mentioned, that you rewatch this series annually, which is really cool, once or twice at least. Biannually. You could probably go back out. Sorry, the Brewers just scored. just watching them, they were doing a selfie, and they were doing a selfie stance, and then in the dugout. My mom's very happy. I hooked my mom onto baseball, so we got this going on. But yeah, you do see this. You do. It's just one of those things. You just have to give it time. And then going back to, not to bring up old wounds, but when you're looking at some of the series that came out that as of yet have not gotten the sequel series that Mandalorian has, or that Ahsoka will get, you start to go, okay, what would happen? What would have been if you'd really let it go and let it find its footing? When back then, it's almost like animation is kind of like a bygone era of, okay, yeah, that was something to come back to. And I think overall, at the end of the day, Rebels is special because it had all the time it needed and got, everything it needed, but still was not as long as Clone Wars, but it got its beginning, middle, and end.
Oh no, absolutely. I totally agree. And I remember, especially with it, I'm glad they got that, because I remember when Clone Wars ended, it was a very abrupt, oh yeah, we're not going to do anymore. It was a very abrupt cutoff, and did not end the way they wanted to, which is why we ended up with a couple more seasons after that. But with Rebels, they made the conscious choice to end it on their own terms. And that was when they announced that at Celebration in 2017 in Orlando. David and I were there in that panel. Dan Z was with us from Coffee with Kenobi, and we're all sitting there, we're watching it. And when they made the announcement that this was going to be their last season, my heart dropped. It was, as exciting as it was to be there watching all this, being in the same room, looking at Dave Filoni on stage and the Rebels cast up there. And it was exciting as it was, when he made that announcement, my heart dropped. And it was the most deflating thing that news that I had gotten up until the show actually ended. But it was something else, man. Something else.
Well, as we kind of maybe get into some of the first season and some of the really, storylines, I want to say, going back to, is it season 1 that introduces the Grand Inquisitor? Because of course, spoilers.
First episode.
But one thing I really loved in that introduction, unfortunately, was that as we kind of find the fate of, is it Master Unduli?
Oh yes, Luminara,
and which it ends up getting Kanan captured, right? Is that the?
Yeah, it was something about the old masters. I can't remember the name. It'll come to me probably in about 2 minutes, but they
Rise of the Old Masters.
Of the Old Masters.
Episode 5. So
yes, they go to try to rescue. They hear she's alive, so they go to try to rescue her, and it leads to Kanan and Ezra getting caught. But then they end up making their escape. But it was that was a crazy episode.
And another reason why I'm kind of bringing that up is that, whereas this is animation, that set a very dark tone that you're going to see throughout this series. Is they do not shy away from really going there. It's not, they don't pull punches. You could really see, especially when, she's a trap, and you go, this is what they're trapping other Jedi. Or say, for example, the showdown between Kanan and the Grand Inquisitor, which the Grand Inquisitor essentially, kind of lets himself die rather than facing Vader. And then, of course, you have, the Vader Ahsoka thing, which, interestingly enough, there's some unresolved things there, which is very interesting.
Oh, yeah.
And then you're getting down to even through Kanan. So all through this series, there are things that aren't clean, that aren't, that goes kind of things. And I think that's what probably also speaks to, it's something that your kids can enjoy, but it really speaks to adult Star Wars fans.
Oh yeah, no, definitely the tone throughout the series was set, starting with that episode and moving on, and especially when you get into Kanan, when Kanan was captured and being tortured, then Hera was captured and tortured later in the series. Those are things that you would not have expected from an animated show that you would think was targeted toward kids. And they set a very dark tone throughout the series, and it just kept getting darker and darker when you end up on Malachor with Maul, and in that thing in Twilight of the Apprentice. Very dark episodes. Then some of I go to the episode where Maul takes and Maul's back in this, guys. If you have not watched the series, if you can't tell, Maul is back in this series. He takes Ezra, and they end up on oh my gosh, my Lanta, what is it?
Are you talking about Malachor?
Not Malachor. Where the Dathomir. They ended up back on Dathomir.
Okay.
And the spirits of the Night Witches possess Kanan and Sabine. It's get some pretty dark and messed up themes throughout there. And then the whole psychology of the show as well. You have these people fighting something larger than life. You have a family, these unrelated people becoming a family and growing, but then you have Kanan losing his sight and having to rediscover who he is. You have Ezra combating the light and dark within him, trying to decide, and fighting the pull of the dark side. I mean, it is just an amazing psychological story laid out through these 4 seasons.
Well, yeah, and what's interesting is that I remember going into season 3, you started to think about is Ezra going to mirror the Luke Skywalker's journey, but in a different way? It eventually works out that it started inching towards that, like in meeting with Maul and assembling the dark, combining the dark and light holocrons, which you can do yourself at Galaxy's Edge for a cool C note. You too can redo that scene
without the explosion.
Without the explosion, yes. But I was thinking like, oh, he's going to go down that, but he doesn't. But not only that, but introducing other concepts, as we will get into. I mean, you start to kind of think about everything you can credit to Rebels if you're thinking about the world between worlds.
Oh yeah.
And the Bendu, Tom Baker's foray into Star Wars animation. So many things. The story behind the Darksaber, right? That's a Rebel. Yeah. No, that's some of that is Mandalorian, but it was brought back into Rebels. I'm saying
it really you saw the Darksaber for the first time in Clone Wars,
right?
But you actually got its backstory in Rebels. You had that at the beginning of an episode when Kanan is talking to Fenn Rau, the protector of Concord Dawn, and he first shows him the Darksaber. Then he tells him the whole story about the first the Mandalorian Jedi, and then of course how it was stolen from the Jedi Temple during the Mandalorian Jedi War and everything. So you get that story filled in there, which is definitely great storytelling especially when you deal with going into the Mandalorian and the legacy of the Darksaber, because you see why she can't just have the saber handed back to her, Bo-Katan, because she had it handed to her in Rebels, and now you understand why she can't just have it handed back to her.
Another theme you kind of see all through is, of course, the series gets its name as being they are an early cell rebellion cell. So you start to see things like on how the rebellion kind of gets some of the Y-wings. Thanks to our friend Chopper. you also see like some of the fleet start to get there. You see some of the like the Tanev type, the cruisers and the hunt for Rebel base, and really sort of finding like you start to see the logistics of how some of this is working out. In of course A New Hope, the Rebel fleet's kind of there, or at least you see the rebellion's there. But this is really you're seeing those pieces together, and once again having the number of seasons and episodes allows them. I think, Bad Batch is another good example of, taking these slow builds and adding stuff. And then even being able to drop back. I'm just looking at the Forgotten Droid. You get, AP5, who won an amazing job. And, we're going to be like missing stuff throughout this entire episode as we talk. You may want to pull your buddy back in and talk a little more because there's just so much, and you go back and you kind of forget just how much was introduced and some of these things going on.
Oh no, absolutely. And with these episodes, you mentioned them earlier, these were like 22, 23-minute episodes. The amount of stuff crammed in these 22-minute episodes is unparalleled. You don't get that much detail and that much side stuff in live action. You just don't. I could still sit down and watch Rebels and pick stuff out that I missed, and I've watched it twice a year since it came out. And it's crazy the amount of stuff that's just crammed into these episodes that tell a story. You mentioned the Y-Wings. The Y-Wings, they got the Y-Wings. They gave them the General Daldana. Oh, everybody knows who Daldana is. Then, of course, you have the episode Secret Cargo, where they're smuggling Mon Mothma to a meeting where she calls the rebellion together. And you see that alliance begin to form. Then you see what probably the reason Lucasfilm probably hates me. You see Saul Guerrera showing up.
That's right.
And for those of you, and I don't know if you remembered this back in the day, but Rogue One came out, huge success. Everybody loved it. And Christmas time, Rebels went on a break for the holidays. Their last episode was like right after Thanksgiving or something like that, and they weren't coming back till after New Year's. Because it was on TV. You take holiday breaks, and I was Christmas shopping with my wife at Toys R Us. And I'm just standing there waiting because she's going through, I got two girls. She's going through all the doll stuff and Barbie stuff. And I'm just kind of standing there, strumming my thumbs, holding the cart, looking across the store where I see the Star Wars sign going, I really need to get over there. But I'm waiting. And there's this big round table in the center of the store. And this guy walks out and he just starts throwing posters down. And I'm like, so I'm just kind of looking. And he throws down a Lego Star Wars poster. I'm like, okay, that's cool. And then he pulls out a stack and lays it down and throws something else on top of it. And I'm like, that's a Rebels logo. So I kind of slide it off to the side and I'm looking, I'm like, that's Saw Gerrera. Saw Gerrera is not in Rebels. Saw Gerrera is going to be in Rebels. I took a picture of that and sent that to Dan. I go, spoiler alert. And he's like, dude, you got to post it. It's the only time I ever posted anything that went literally viral.
Wow.
Cause literally this was on a Friday, or I think it was a Friday. I was off work. It was a Friday. And I snapped that picture. I posted it online. Saw Gerrera's coming to Rebels, and 48 hours later, Lucasfilm releases a video with Dave Filoni talking about him coming to Rebels.
Wow.
It was apparently not, and it come to find out that poster wasn't supposed to be released till after he premiered. They just stuck it out early by accident, and I took I'm gonna take about 4 of these, okay? And yeah, that was very exciting. But yeah, you have Saw Gerrera in there, and got to see how he went from the guy we saw in Clone Wars to what we see in Rogue One. And you begin to see that rift between him and the Alliance at that point as well. And you see some of his antics in these episodes, because he's in several episodes. You can see some of his antics, which lead to that issue. And it's just crazy. And the thing is, the whole time, he doesn't even know it, but the whole time he's chasing the Death Star. He has no clue he's doing it, but he is chasing the Death Star. He just doesn't know it.
Well, and that's kind of the cool thing, because one, Forrest Whitaker is doing the voice from Saw Gerrera. And so for us, we're going nuts. And of course, when you have an episode like Ghosts of Geonosis, where it's like, oh, wow, we're going back to, and it starts that, I think it kind of starts that, for me, going back to the prequels and kind of pulling in some of that. And you start to go, oh, just kind of like with Ahsoka, with Captain Rex, we kind of went through that, watching Kanan and Rex really not get along. I mean, it's obviously more Kanan than Rex, but you start to see, wow, those threads that are kind of going back between where Star Wars is now and going back to the prequels and really and Clone Wars, and really kind of, make that continue what the Clone Wars was doing, I should say. But, for a generation that, like me, that kind of came in, that Rebels is our back entry point back into it. Oh, this is really well. And you start to, especially after we had seen all these recurring characters that we had seen, plus you get new characters, right? Well, he's new to me. Hondo Ohnaka was not new. He came in with Clone Wars, but for me, I'm like, wow, the Rebels Hondo Ohnaka, absolutely fantastic.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, and that's one thing that was really good about Rebels is, even though they pulled characters from Clone Wars with Rex, with Ahsoka, with Hondo, they changed the characters. They were true to who they were, but they changed the characters enough that they seemed like different characters. They had aged, they grew up, they had matured, they were different. I think Hondo went a little bit more off the deep end, crazy wise, but it was fun. And it just made those characters so much more interesting as you go through Rebels, and see how they're interacting and how they would, because a lot of times you don't get to see, when you watch a story, you don't get to see how people react. You see the story, but you don't see what happens after the story. You don't see, okay, this person, you watch, like Batman, you watch Batman movie, you see that happens. He beats the Joker. Yay. What happens next? What happens 20 years from now? What happens 30 years from now? What's going to happen? And you get to see that in this show with these characters, even with the one episode that brought in Kenobi in Twin Sons in season 3. You get to see that difference in that character, and the maturity that's changed from what we saw in Clone Wars to what we saw in Rebels. You see that change from the prequels to the original trilogy Kenobi, and you can see that transition in that episode.
Well, how about the biggest one, between the fight between Ahsoka and Darth Vader, where you start to go, now you're starting to see, I think, Anakin as Vader instead of just Darth Vader. You see him more as, and you start to kind of go, what would happen? And, they don't really pull any punches. I mean, as we kind of find out later, there was a lot more to it that we didn't see, and there's still some things we didn't see. But yeah, it is, they really took advantage of the time they had, and they really were able to do so much with it. There was, I think it's probably one of the, they just had so much opportunity, and I don't think they squandered any of it.
No, they took advantage of every moment they had, and that was and honestly, I have to credit that to Dave Filoni, because everything Dave Filoni has done, whether it was Clone Wars, whether it was Rebels, even Resistance, he did it a lot with Resistance, and in the episodes he directed in Mandalorian, he took advantage of every moment in the episode to tell a story. He definitely did that with the Ahsoka series. He takes it. You're talking about somebody who learned at the feet of George Lucas when it comes to telling a Star Wars story, and he took it to the next. Honestly, he took it to the next level. George could tell fantastic stories and spread it out. Dave does the same thing, but he can cram so much detail and flesh out the story so much more than George Lucas ever did, because of the medium he has and the time he has. And it just really, really caused this series to explode, being able to do that.
Well, something else that it might be a good time to kind of start thinking about that is thinking about all the equipment. Let's talk about the ships.
Mm-hmm.
Like we said before, with the Y-Wings kind of getting a little love. How about that episode where we learn of kind of like the origin of the B-Wing,
Yep.
which is a lot of folks' favorite from Return of the Jedi. The Ghost, and the fact that it worked with a secondary ship and not just a little like an escape pod. We're talking about the Phantom, rest in peace. And of course, I have to favor the Phantom too, because that was the Lego set that I got. I wasn't in on the first Ghost set and Phantom set. And if you have one of those things and you haven't cracked it open, you have a nice little chunk of change there if you ever want to unload that. But all these different ships and the speeder bikes, which they use even in the beginning, the Darksaber, the equipment, the combination. What are some things that kind of stand out from just that small list of things in just what we get to see? How about the was it the Mining Guild TIE fighters, right? They have that little cutout. So there's a lot of tech in here that's really, really cool.
Yeah, and it's not just the fighters; it's the ground vessels as well. We got to see the Kenner troop transports in action because of Rebels, because we see them in season 1 and throughout the series. So it's those, the ATDPs, the ATATs, all come through here. The TIE fighters, we see Thrawn. Come to find out, the TIE Defender is a Thrawn project. And we see those in season 3. And these ships and everything that comes through is just so incredible. The Hammerhead Corvette, we find out how the Rebellion gets those in this series. I mean, there's so many ties that spread out to the entire saga from this series, and it's incredible to see. And the ships, the technology, the weapons, the Thrawn's Chimera, his Star Destroyer, the Chimera, we see that for the first time in animation or in anywhere. Of course, then you see it in Half Destroyed in Ahsoka. But if you want to see how that happened, go back and watch the finale of Rebels. You'll understand why it looks like a piece of trash at this point. But it is one of those things that they're just so well built in how they get things done. The technology, I think about the cargo ships that we see, the Imperial cargo ships, which basically is just a whole bunch of cargo containers looped together, pulled by a tug. I mean, incredible. And of course, that's where we get AP5 from. And it's these type of things that just the carrier, the ship, the fighter carrier that they steal from the Empire.
That's right.
Was it Sky Striker base? that they go and infiltrate to rescue Wedge and Javi from. I mean, these are just things that you just see going on throughout Rebels. I mean, there's just so much in this series that just I don't know. It gets me tongue tied, my friend.
Well, not even on the tech. We also have the introduction of the Purgle, which I think,
Purgle?
Yeah.
You do.
That also seems to come out of left field, but as we know, still resonates, 8 or 9 years later in the Ahsoka series, where we see them get spoilers for Ahsoka series if you haven't seen it. But also, how about, and probably one of the more controversial is the Inquisitor lightsaber.
Yep.
Which, of course, probably can get to the voice talents of Jason Isaacs, who amazing, and Amy Mulder can tell us a little something. I know that she had a chance to meet and get his autograph, but yeah, thinking about how to make them like, oh, they can actually float down with the lightsabers and then they spin and things like that, but also you're getting that taste of the Inquisitorius, and you're like, which later on when you see Obi-Wan, right, and you see the fifth brother, and you kind of go, and the Grand Inquisitor, and you're going, oh man, just so great. But these all have their hooks in Rebels. Oh yeah,
they certainly do, and these are, oh man, the Inquisitorius. Don't give me that's.
No, I'm here to get you started.
Obviously you are. I can tell. I can tell. This is our first glimpse of the Inquisitorius outside of books and comics in this series. And Jason Isaacs, honestly, fantastic job. I mean, he did an incredible job voicing the Grand Inquisitor. Very chilling, very strong, and then. He dies at the end of season 1, spoiler alert, with probably one of the most chilling lines in the series when he's hanging there off that bridge. And he's like, come on, you don't have to die. You can live. And he's laying there. He goes, some things are worse than death. Then lets go and falls to his death, and he's like, and of course, Kanan's confused, but everybody knows, yeah, he don't want to face Vader. There's some people you don't want to cross, and you see how that works in the Kenobi series when Vader comes storming in and is literally on the verge of killing Reva because she failed. And it makes that even more just, so good. One of those sayings that you just can't walk away from. But this series is full of the Inquisitor. We get the Inquisitors, we get Grand Inquisitor. Then if he gone, and then we get 2 Inquisitors to replace him with this sister and the brother, which was entertaining because the sister was voiced by
Sarah Michelle Gellar. Yeah.
Of course, everybody knows her relationship with Freddie Prinze Jr. So that was just funny to watch them interact with each other on screen. Of course, if y'all don't know, Freddie Prinze is the voice of Kanan. If y'all don't know that, if y'all have not watched Rebels and you're listening to this,
how much have we spoiled so far?
We have spoiled the series for you, but you need to go watch it. I don't care if we've spoiled everything for you, because there's a lot we haven't spoiled, because there's a lot of episodes.
There's a lot of episodes, and there's a lot that I think is worth a rewatch.
Oh, absolutely.
There's 2 things that happen, and I think it's maybe a good time, Aaron, to kind of give them their due. And throughout the whole series, we'd kind of gotten into, this happens over the course of Rogue One, where everybody, pretty spoilers for Rogue One, everybody dies. But through the whole thing, you kind of go, we don't see, of course, Ezra and Kanan later on, in the shows. And so I think everybody throughout the whole series is trying to figure out what's going to happen, or maybe when. And I think it's interesting that in season 4, two of probably now the most dramatic. And I think what's interesting is that, there's almost a two-parter, right? So the first one is the unfortunate passing of Kanan, which is probably one of the series highlights, although it's his demise or his sacrifice, like to say. But the second is Ezra's departure, which I think now has been given a little more weight with, of course, the Ahsoka series.
Yes.
So it's interesting that it's not something that, Kanan passes away or dies, and there's still a good chunk of season 4 left.
Yeah.
I'd like to first get your reactions as far as Kanan's death, and then we can kind of get into Ezra's departure, but kind of the feelings on how they pulled that off and how you felt.
Oh, okay. So you're talking about the one episode that I'm a bubbling mess after watching. No matter how many times I have seen it, I still feel it every time. There's just something about that moment when he is holding the flames back and he's holding Hera in air, and he turns and looks at her, and for one brief second through the Force, his eyesight returns before he shoves her back in the ship and shoves the ship away, and everything explodes. I mean, it is just, what it, I'll tell you, when it first aired, I wept. I'm not going to lie. I literally sat in my office. I watched it in my office at my old house, and when it aired, and I'm sitting there and it happened, and I'm sitting there and I am a bubbling mess. I could not believe I had just watched the death of Kanan Jarrus. And then, and looking back on it, you asked me how I think they did it. I don't see them doing it any better than what they did. You sit there and you try to pick it apart, and how else could they have done it? There is no other way for Kanan to lose his life other than sacrificing to save the ones he loves.
And also the buildup of, his relationship with Hera has kind of been alluded to. It's, but you could start to see as it got closer that you were very thankful then that they had they had a couple of moments.
Yes.
They obviously had a lot more moments at some point, but it was at least given, I think, some breath and some respect. It's something that, I felt they did with a lot of respect, and also, how many characters in Star Wars. I mean, you think of Obi-Wan Kenobi in A New Hope, raising that saber, and then, kind of his self-sacrifice to allow them to get out, sort of like, kind of distract Vader and all that. But here you have that. And that masterstroke of giving Kanan back his vision, albeit briefly, and you start to go, it was just a masterstroke, everything else. But then you kind of felt that, like with Rogue One, that there was sacrifice, that this meant something. There was stuff on the line. There were stakes. And you start to go, wow, this is really pulled off so well. And this is an animated show, but everything about it, from their treatment of it to the voice work for it, like I can still hear, Vanessa Marshall's Kanan, she's screaming out, and, it's chilling. I can just feel it right now, but just so well done. And, but it's not the end of the show.
Oh, no. And that's what was so incredible about his death is, yes, his death ended that episode, and it picked right back up in the next episode, right where it left off, with the survivors getting back. And Zeb's like, has no clue. He's like, how'd it go? Where's Kanan?
He's gone.
Like, he's gone. He's like, gone where? No, he's gone. What? And of course you have Hera off. And to me, this episode, once this episode started, this next scene I'm about to describe, this just took you right back to the explosion, because Hera walks off and she's just staring off blankly in the distance, not knowing what to do, not knowing she has lost her friend, she's lost her love, she's lost someone she has walked life with for years, and she's by herself, feels like she's alone, staring off the infinity. And next thing you know, you see that little droid roll up, and his little hand come out of his head and just clamp on her hand. And I'm like, okay, I'm crying again. I mean, like, how can you not? Yes, Chopper has a reputation as a murder droid and a war criminal, but he's just got a warm spot inside. Inside he's just a big old teddy bear. Just don't tell him I said that.
Yeah, he'll deny it. He'll deny it.
Oh yeah, he'll kill me in my sleep so it doesn't get out.
But then you have, what I think is kind of a payoff with Ezra's big plan at the end, which we don't find out until, like at the end of the series. Here's someone that started off with, he's just this vagabond kid that just scrounges and steals, and he's cocky and all this, to where he really, kind of gets it at the end, and he realizes there's only Doctor Strange and the Avengers, where it's like, you're only one way out of this. But he, because, Thrawn is brought in and treated very well, because, a lot of the Imperial officers, Governor Price and a lot of others, are kind of treated as kind of bumbling idiots. But Thrawn, is not that. He's a mastermind. But it was, Thrawn gets, kind of gets the best of Thrawn if you kind of come at him like, who's going to expect the Bendu to come out of nowhere and all of a sudden go, all right. But even, as he's fighting and as the Purgle is kind of taking over, crumbling some of the ships, and he says, whatever happens to both of us.
Yes.
So it's like the only way you're going to take out Thrawn, or you're going to defeat Thrawn, is that you really have to come up with something that's unexpected, but also on sort of a grand scale, because he's not to be traveled with. But I also like the fact that they gave him that respect, is like, hey, look, you know what, we've got to figure out a way to do it, but it's not just like, oh darn, you got me.
Well, yeah, because if you go back to the original Thrawn trilogy, when Thrawn died at the end, it was very anticlimactic. I mean, he was stabbed in the back by Rook in the original books, but you needed something more epic for this, and I think they did that with how he was. The only time the two times that they had the major battles, and the two times he was defeated, it wasn't the rebels that defeated him, it was the Bendu. No, there's no way he could have saw that coming. And of course, if he would have had a plan to defeat it. He doesn't lose like that. Then you have, of course, this final battle where the Purgle show up and just latch onto their ship and fly away. I mean, these are exigent circumstances you don't plan on when you're talking about a battle. So it's like, what do we do? What's going on? But he is such a deep and complex character that just really made the latter half of this series and made the danger so much more real for our heroes.
Yeah, speaking of danger, the Brewers just got some danger of their own, as the Mets have taken the lead in the top of the ninth, 3-2, off of a home run. So it's got a little tense. You want to talk about Thrawn tense? It is Thrawn tense now in the city of Milwaukee as we are talking.
Well, I know our friend Jason Fry is probably very excited.
Or yes, George from Meanwhile the Podcast, who's a big Mets fan. Shout out to George out at the Meanwhile the Podcast, or any of the Mets fans at that moment. But yeah, and to see that, and what's interesting is now going back, right? So I think after Ahsoka, we all go back and we kind of see that interaction with Sabine and Ezra and Ezra's lightsaber. And now you start to go, I think I've watched that more than a couple times to kind of go, okay, you see what's going on, and you just know that something hopefully comes, but it doesn't come for quite some time.
Yeah.
Unlike Clone Wars that kind of had, there was like, well, is there, and Clone Wars lives and all that kind of stuff. Rebels, it wasn't until you started hearing that there was a live action Ahsoka series and you started seeing that you were going to see Ezra, you were going to see Hera in this, or you're going to see Sabine, that really, Ahsoka, and maybe a little bit to its, maybe not so good, almost kind of gets called a Rebels season 5.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of that owes it to how well they pulled off the finale of Rebels, but left so much on the table that it was bold enough to say, we're not going to tell you what happens to Ezra.
Yeah, no, they pulled out that ending very well, leaving those the unclosed stories, but they still closed the series out perfectly. I don't know if you've heard this story too, but the only people in the cast that knew about that monologue at the end was Dave, the sound guy, and Tia Sircar, who's Sabine, because they were after they wrapped shooting and everything was done. Dave pulled her aside and goes, "Hey, you got this to read still," and she had to record that. She goes, she did an interview. She's like, I couldn't make it through it. I was so wrecked emotionally. I could not make it through it. But she ended up doing it and it was perfect. And that's when you find out about Jason Syndulla. It's when you find out that Ahsoka comes back to go hunt for Ezra. And you knew that there was that open-ended story right there where Sabine and Ahsoka are going off to hunt for Ezra. And it really gave, even though the series ended, it gave a lot of fans hope, because obviously Dave wouldn't have done this if he had no intention of telling the story.
Right.
So it was just a matter of that time of waiting. It was a waiting game at that point. But who would have thought it would have taken 9 years? Because Ahsoka was last year, right? So 9 years before we got the continuation of the story.
But as well, there was some interesting ancillary material that comes out. And I'm thinking specifically of the Marvel Comics series, Kanan, was it The Last Padawan or something like that? And John Jackson Miller's A New Dawn. Do you have some? Have you read those? Do you have them?
I have read the comic, and I have read New Dawn. New Dawn actually came out before Rebels. It was it was a prequel. It was basically they called it the prequel to Rebels. To introduce you to Hera and to Kanan. So that book actually came out prior to Rebels, and I don't have an original copy. I don't have a copy from then. I just have the Kindle version that I bought because I wanted to read it. So I don't have that book in my collection, unfortunately. I do need to get my hands on that one. But and the comics, I've read the comics, but I don't have them. So I'm picking them up as I can find them. I think I got like number 12 and number 8 and number 6. And as I'm finding them in my comic store, every time I go in, he gets a new shipment of new comics at my local store that he's bought off. So I go in and I'm flipping through the box looking for different issues so I can get the collection complete. But
I have every one of those comics except the one that has the first appearance of Sabine, which is the one that's worth the most, unfortunately. It's interesting that sort of a little bit of Kanan's backstory as far as how he and Depa Billaba, his master, kind of come to be together and then to separate, his role in Order 66, which is interesting because they revisit it in the beginning of the Bad Batch, slightly different. As as we've seen before, it's like the books and the comics usually take a backseat if they're going to do animation or live action.
Mm-hmm.
But it's something if you haven't had a chance to either get like a graphic novel or get a Kindle version, Kanan and the Last Padawan is some gorgeous art and a really great story. And I'd kind of forgotten as I was kind of looking. There were also, and I do have, I might still have it. There were some Forces of Destiny comics with Hera. Yeah. And then some of the IDW Star Wars Adventures, where there was some Rebels stories in that as well, which are pretty good. And then, some Forces of Destiny in the animated form when that series was. There's a little bit of the characters in there. So if you haven't had a chance to, I actually had I got a copy of A New Dawn signed by John Jackson Miller because he comes down to Joliet Star Wars Day. He's usually a fixture there in the authors section. And I think I had read it in the Kindle, but I did get a copy that I had him sign. And I've almost bought it a couple of times, have him signed, just because I like the fact of having John Jackson Miller sign a copy of a great book, which is actually a good read and still holds up, I think.
See, I need to do that. I've met John Jackson Miller once, but it was at Celebration in Orlando. But it was literally in passing. I was leaving the convention center as he was trying to get back into it, and we passed each other in a hallway. And I stopped him and said hi and shook his hand, but I didn't stick around to really have a conversation because not 5 minutes before I had tripped, going up the stairs and broke my hand.
Oh,
so I literally had a broke left hand while I was talking to John Jackson Miller. And so I didn't do near what I would have done if I wasn't, writhing in pain the whole time I was sitting there trying to smile at him.
Well, and then you were also lucky because although you had Timothy Zahn, who you met at Central Florida Comic-Con, say, do the plug saying, good for you. I don't know if you'd really want John Jackson Miller to say good for you. And you're like, not really. No.
Yeah, exactly. yeah, really. When I broke that hand, I literally, because I was leaving the convention and I had to go to downtown Disney for a podcast meetup. So literally I went to downtown Disney for a podcast meetup with the broken hand without going to the doctor's office first. And so I'm there and I called it, I was doing the Bob Dole. I literally had I had a cup of ice in that hand to ice it down. And nothing ever left that. Literally, it was pinned up against my chest the whole night. And nobody knew till I showed the x-rays 2 days later on Facebook.
Oh my goodness. As someone who's had their thumb broken during baseball tryouts when I was in high school, that was, I remember sitting waiting for 3 hours for the doctor, and that was some throbbing pain until you could get it looked at. So I can sympathize because I know it's one of those where it's like, that thing just had to have been throbbing. It's interesting without going through, as we're excited about Rebels, and I'm sure if we polled our friends, the New York Mets, they're excited about anything right now because they're still up. Oh, good Lord. At any rate. All right. Okay, good. I think they finally finished the inning. What are some of the series what are some of your favorite aspects of it? I think that's probably a good way because, you could break down episode by episode, but hello, you guys did that. Rebels Reactions does a really good job. And I think a fun exercise, if you're out there and you haven't had a chance to revisit it, I would recommend watching them and then going back and listening to some of the Rebels Reactions episodes because you're getting them in the moment. And there's going to be like, hey, what happens next? Or like this. So there's a little bit of, I think you could fun and play along, especially if you hit some of the more, more well-known, like, if you go back to, Twin Sons, or the Honorable Ones, which, honorable mention for the Honorable Ones.
That was a fantastic episode.
Fantastic episode. Was it Twilight of the Apprentice, which I still have contention with, because they introduced this amazing thing that happened on Malachor with these petrified Jedi and Sith, and they never discuss it again. And every now and then I'll kind of go back in and see if somebody's updated. Did they mention this somewhere? And they never have. But then you have, like, how about, the episodes with, the interview with the Bendu, and then you have, Thrawn. So all these amazing episodes. What are some things that you just go, oh, chef's kiss, besides the series in general?
Besides the series in general, there's for me, especially being such a huge Rebels fan, to me, there's a lot of chef's kiss throughout the entire series. But if I had to go and try to narrow it down to just, to me, what were the best moments of the series, I would have to start with the premiere with Spark of the Rebellion, especially the scene which I mentioned earlier, where Kanan basically shocks the world by sharing his secret so confidently, and Agent Callus is just focus all fire on and then he pauses and hesitates, and you can hear almost a little fear in his voice. The Jedi. The disbelief and fear in his voice at that point, as they all open fire and Kanan's just expertly just flipping them aside, the bolts, and it is just to me, that's a moment there. Then you get into other moments, like with there's the episode, to me it's a moment, but it's a comedic moment, when you have AP5 just floating through space, surrounded by space butterflies, and he's singing a song, relaxing, and is so happy. Then he sees the ghost coming. He's like, no, 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 no. And he just gobbled up by the ghost and flies away. That, to me, that was a perfect moment. But then you have a moment where, and I can't remember I can't remember the name of the episode, but it's when Ahsoka first fights the Inquisitors, when they rescuing the Force children, the Force babies, and she steps out, and she is just literally she's going 2-on-1 with these Inquisitors, her versus the brother and sister, and they're just going at it. To me, that was perfect. Or when Vader is literally single-handedly taking out the rebel fleet in his fighter by himself, and that's when Ahsoka first reaches out and begins to think that, oh my gosh, this could be Anakin, and Vader feels her presence. He's like, oh, the apprentice lives. And for flying away. I mean, it's just, those to me are just some perfect moments. To me, and then of course they have them on the flip side as well for the bad guys. Thrawn, when he is in, when they've captured Hera, when she goes to get the Kalikori from her home, and Thrawn is basically walking around her, like, war is all you've known. You grew up with it. It's all you know. So of course you would be a great fighter. And then reveals to this other dim-witted Imperial that, this is your nemesis's daughter. This is Hera. This is Sham's daughter. And it was just a perfect evil moment for Thrawn, and it to me just proved the complexity of this guy's just pure wisdom and wit, and how much trouble he was going to be for these rebels. How about you? What are your moments for the show?
I'll go back to Twilight of the Apprentice just because it was so fascinating to see that. Also, in looking at some of the ones you were kind of talking about, I had that up there with. Nope, I lost it. I was kind of looking through. The Future of the Force,
Yes.
with the children, Princess on Lothal. We have Princess Leia in there. Oh man, Shauna Dogg's Mystery of Chopper Base.
Yeah.
It's interesting to see, like, when you're looking back and you're seeing the introduction of Thrawn and in the beginning of season 3, and also Tom Baker as Bendu. Oh my gosh, Holocrons of Fate. When you're still going through and you see the 2 holocrons there, man, there's just so much in this. Ghost of Geonosis once again with Saw Gerrera, Forrest Whitaker on it. And then, there's that whole, we haven't even had a chance to kind of talk a little bit about, Sabine and the Darksaber, Trials of the Darksaber, Legacy of Mandalore, which some really interesting things there. Oh, it looks like the Mets won. Oh, congratulations to the New York Mets winner. Winner of the NL wild card against over the Milwaukee Brewers. All right. There we go. But yeah, you have some just amazing moments. Twin Sons, which is interesting because we think it's going to be this big showdown between Kenobi and Maul, and come to find, very samurai-like, Kenobi dispatches him quite quickly, but yet there's that great tender moment between Kenobi and Maul, and both understand what's happened, and is he the chosen one? And Kenobi's like, yeah. And so that was it was beautiful. It was so beautifully done, and just one of the many moments in this. And then, of course, as we get into season 4 with, Kanan, the death of Kanan, and of course, the Ezra's departure, just some amazing pieces there. But still, it's kind of like, right during all that, Hondo thinks he's lost his friend, the Ugnaught who's with him, and then it wakes back up, and then they kind of go off, and it's really a great way to make some light of the moment as they destroy a base with lots of people on it. But what's interesting is at the very end, right? And we didn't even get a chance to talk about, the epilogue, which sets up a lot what we would see later, and fuels how many podcasts and how much discussion over those just couple of moments of there. You see Ahsoka in all white with a staff, and we think, and there's Sabine with short haircut as she's talking about watching Lothal, build itself back up. And all of a sudden the introduction of Jason, which, every time I saw him come back in, Star Wars Card Trader, I'm like, yay, there's Jason. And only to see, how much more satisfying when you see him in live action in the Ahsoka series. And so that, I think, is, to me, some of the best moments of Rebels. And there are just so many. But it's just so much fun that it has given us so much more, not only, like over the years of not just, talking about it, reliving it, but, Ahsoka or Hera kind of showing up in Rogue One. A little bit of Chopper and the Ghost, if you kind of pay attention, or Rise of Skywalker, where you see the Ghost for a second, you're like, yes, that's the Ghost. So it's kind of fun. It's been fun to see everything kind of pop back up, and as we, even with at the end of Ahsoka season 1, there's still more stories to be told, and whether it's called Rebels or whether they're more in a background, or they're in the Bad Batch, right? That's kind of it's fun. It's been fun to watch.
Oh, it really has. It really has. And I have to throw out there the fact that in Forces of Destiny, Han Solo admits the Ghost is the better ship. He does. Go and watch it.
Yep. It's on record, kids.
He does. It's on records. It's there. This show has been so impactful throughout the entire saga. It has stretched its tentacles out to affect everything that you've seen. And you can't watch anything Star Wars now without seeing something that takes you back to Rebels. And I'm not just talking about the Ahsoka show. I mean, The Mandalorian, you have the Darksaber, Bo-Katan, you have Zeb Orrelios.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, all this leads back to Rebels. Andor, you have Mon Mothma, the foundation of the rebellion going on. All of that's ties up into Rebels. You have all this stuff happening. You have everything going on with the Book of Boba Fett. You have everything. Of course, that's Kenobi. You can't tie much into Rebels, much more than Kenobi right there with the Inquisitors and of course Obi-Wan, because Obi-Wan's in Rebels too. I mean, these are all things. Everything comes back. It's almost like you can almost sit down and play. You remember the old 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon? You could do this with Star Wars. Get to connect to Rebels in 6 moves. You could probably do it in a lot less for most things in Rebels, in Star Wars, connecting right back to it. So it's for a series that came out, lasted 4 seasons from 14 to 18. It really has left a lasting impact on the entire saga. And I got a feeling will continue forever. There'll be a lot of things that come right back to it.
Well said. I think it's worth, if you haven't seen it, or maybe you haven't seen all of it, it's worth going back and watching, because I think that you're right. I think a lot of this new era of Disney Star Wars owes a lot to Rebels. To kind of be that bridge from, the Lucasfilm to the Disney era, but in a way that they were able to tell a complete story. They had very good characters, and voice talents behind them that we continue to, get to see at conventions. Like even last year, we got to see a Rebels reunion panel at ICCC in Nashville, and had Vanessa Marshall and Steve Bloom and Tia Sakar and the lady that did the voice for Governor Price, who is married to Steve Bloom.
Mary McGinn.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think you're right. And of course, the voice for Ezra.
Taylor Gray.
And it was a great panel. I was able to get a picture and put it on one of my swag pack cards. You can continue to revisit this show and enjoy it. And I think that even for those of you who have seen it, and maybe not have seen it in a while, hey, you got Disney Plus. We're still waiting for Skeleton Crew to come out. So a great time to go back and revisit what we all loved about Rebels, and maybe what there is to discover for you out there if you haven't had a chance to see all of it, because there's some really cool stuff in Star Wars Rebels.
Oh, absolutely. And honestly, I can't wait to see what happens in Skeleton Crew that's going to link back to Rebels. Everything has had something. And I'll go ahead and do this. I normally don't do it. Here's my guess. Okay. Because we know Skeleton Crew is going to involve what? Pirates. Yep. Who's everybody's favorite pirate?
Oh, you're going to get my hopes up. Aaron.
That's I have no inside knowledge. I have not seen anything. I know nothing. This is just my wishful thinking guess. But I could see Hondo. I could see it.
One of my favorite things at Galaxy's Edge is in Smuggler's Run, you get to see the animatronic Hondo Ohnaka, and a great job. And and what an incredible voice actor who I forget at the moment.
Jim Cummings. Yes,
that's
Winnie the Pooh is Hondo Ohnaka.
As someone, like I said, who's I'm not that. I was never that big into the Amblin Entertainment flicks. I did not see Goonies. I did not see E.T. Not because I was too young. Something I just wasn't into at the time, because there was other sci-fi out there. But I would say that if I was looking for a hook, hello, Jude Law. I've said it there. I've said it. I'll be very interested. Yes. If there would be a perfect way to put him in here. And, he also has, like I said, Rebels kind of gave him a little more of a lighter tone. Mm-hmm. But wouldn't that be something, and just another piece of this legacy of Star Wars Rebels, that if you had a character like Hondo show up, and it would make perfect sense, that would be something that could tie in fans, oh yeah, and give that story a grounding. We already have for that one
Yeah.
pirate from The Mandalorian. But wouldn't that be something? That would be tremendous.
Oh, I think it'd be great. I think it'd be great. I can hear him now. Hello, my friends.
Oh, that would be awesome. That'd be awesome.
Great. It'd be awesome. So, fingers crossed. We'll see what happens. But
there we go.
The force is with us. So, all right. Well, we could keep going on and on and on because there's so much about Rebels we could talk about. We haven't even touched on the impact of the music and soundtracks of from Rebels. We haven't talked about we could talk about episodes. We could talk about favorite episodes. We could talk about favorite moments. There's so much we could talk about, but we're going to wrap things up. We'll have to do this again another time, and we can just keep going. But let's wrap it up. Of course, we want to hear from y'all. Let us know what you think of Rebels as we celebrate 10 years of Rebels. You can, of course, hit us up on any of our social media. We're on Facebook and X at SW Reactions Pod. Then, of course, everywhere else at SW Reactions, like Threads, Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest, Tumblr, YouTube, Blue Sky, you name it, we're there. And of course, email at swreactions@gmail.com or voicemail. Leave us a voicemail at Star Wars Reactions at it's speakpipe.com/Star Wars Reactions. Carabast.
I would say, hey, to the loyal Star Wars Reactions listeners out there, definitely put in a voicemail, and I think that would be a fun follow-up for Dave and Aaron's to hear what your favorite moments from Star Wars Rebels was. What was that one thing that got you? Maybe it was, what was the thing that hooked you, and what was the thing that just made you, like for me, have the hair stand on your arm? What are those things? Get on that speak pipe and send them into Star Wars Reactions, because I want to hear. You've heard enough of what I had to say. Oh my gosh, I want to hear when I'm listening to this or the follow-up episodes. I want to hear what y'all have to say. Yes,
we do. We want to hear from you. So let us know. We will definitely put together y'all show up. We'll do the listener reaction episode. Bring it in, folks. Let's do it. So surprise David with it as well. So
exactly.
All right.
Wouldn't that be fun?
By the way, surprise David, I got Greg with me.
Yes, and after you get done putting in your reactions, what were some of your favorite Rebels moments? Drop me a line and tell me what your World Series predictions are, because I'd be very curious. Now I'll be up since this baseball playoff season has hooked me again. Who are your predictions? Who are you liking in the World Series?
And how would they go about doing that, Greg?
Well, they could reach me out on the socials at Rebel Base Card. I am on Instagram, on Twitter X. You can find me on Blue Sky, on Facebook. You can email the program, greg@rebelbasecard.com. I am sitting on hours and hours of podcasts, audio that I need to finish editing and post, because people are like, hey, did something happen to you? We are in the middle of volleyball season, and my daughter seems to be playing every other night. And so there's been a lot going on, but we will be getting out some great content soon, including more reactions on, as you alluded in your news episode, on the Topps Disney agreement and what that entails as far as cards and the impact that it has on different folks in the community. Greg and I, on the Breakfast Pack, or what should we say, Building the Breakfast, did about half of the episodes of Rebuilding the Galaxy, and we have another one to go to. We have to record, but that was fun because Rebuilding the Galaxy was another piece of Star Wars animation that told a really good story. And like I said, they seem to have the animation down like the back of their hand, and that was a fun series and a lot of surprises in that. And so look for that to come as well, just as soon as I can get that stuff posted. But anyway, it's been a gas, but a lot of good stuff coming up, I promise.
Very good, very good. And of course, we'll have links to find Greg and Rebel Base Card there in our show notes, so make sure you check it out there. And of course, feel free to drop David a line and say, hey, we missed you. Of course, you can hit him up on what he likes to call Twitter X at David_Motters. And of course, you can hit him up on Instagram at David Motters. And Blue Sky is at David Motters, whatever the Blue Sky attachment is. I never can remember that. I got too much other stuff to remember. Just at David Motters, Blue Sky stuff. Then, of course, you can always hit me up through any of the social show media, or, of course, you can hit me up on my X at TA Harris 121079 and go from there. And, of course, if you send a message to David through the show socials, I'll get that to him as well. Well, Greg, you know what time it is?
Say? Yes. Oh, that's right. I completely forgot. It was time before we left. I thought I was going to be able to sneak out. I wasn't going to say anything, folks, but he caught me as I was inching my way towards the door.
Oh, no, there is no forgetting the Star Wars dad joke of the week.
Lay it on me.
I need to find some intro music. I need to get a whole intro built for that. I think
you need to get an intro done for that.
I do. I need to. I'll need to work on that over the next few weeks. All right, here we go. Are you ready? Here we go. What do you call a Mandalorian armor you piece together on your own?
What do you call a Mandalorian armor that you piece together on its own?
A do-fit yourself outfit.
Oh. Fit yourself outfit. Oh. Boy, I felt that right in the back, right over there. I was like, wow, he's good, folks. This guy's a pro. This guy's a pro. He knows what he's doing.
David, you missed it, bro.
Dad joke responsibly, kids.
He's going to text. He'll text me tomorrow and be like, "Oh my gosh, dude." Well, Greg, I appreciate you joining us tonight. Thank you for hopping on here at the last minute and just shooting the breeze about Rebels, because it is one of my favorite subjects. So I appreciate you coming on with us. And of course, we appreciate each and every one of you listening in this week. We love y'all. We are praying for you. Appreciate each and every one of you. And thank you for listening in and for joining us all over social media. Y'all are the best. Y'all are the greatest. And of course, right now with everything going on in the world, and just do something for somebody and do something kind. It's everybody. The simplest act will change something for somebody. So do it. Don't be afraid. Just do it. Like Nike says, just do it. Do it. Remember, this is your place for elegant discussion for a more civilized age.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company or by Lucasfilm Limited. It's intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars. All names, sounds, and any other Star Wars-related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Star Wars Reactions, unless otherwise indicated. Star Wars Reactions. Elegant discussion for a more civilized age.